not really a surprise. If you listen to the voice, kind of your tendencies, your vocal tendencies, somehow along the line, you wound up as Optimus freaking Prime.
Yeah, true story.
What for a couple miniseries, and then is this ongoing? And how are you the next freaking Peter Cullen?
I'm trying to think back to when this all started. I mean, the seeds for this thing have been planted a long time. I've been a Transformers fan clearly for 35 years.
Well, you've done other
my
Transformers stuff as
yeah.
well, but I
Yeah,
mean, Optimus
so
is
I
freaking.
got interested into it because I first heard Peter Cullen, there's the original voice of Optimus Prime. I heard him doing the intro for the original Voltron cartoon in the 80s. It wasn't actually from Transformers. And that for some reason, that voice just freaking stuck with me. That Voltron, defender of the universe. And I was like, that's freaking cool. I want to be that when I grow up. I didn't even know what that meant, but that's what I wanted to be, that voice when I grew up. And then I heard him again as Optimus Prime in Transformers, and it instantly got me hooked. And I started playing with the toys and just like became a super fan. And I'd been working on that voice since I was a little kid with a Fisher-Price tape recorder, recording all the I started doing impressions and started getting good at improvisation and stuff through Transformers partially. And I introduced myself to the folks at Comic-Con a few times over at Hasbro. And I got introduced to Hasbro from Star Wars, actually. Back when I first got started in voiceover, it was my first year, second month doing this professionally. I booked the Star Wars commercial campaign for the Clone Wars, the Captain Rex, and it was like 4 or 5 commercials where I was filling in for D. Bradley Baker's voice. And I learned then that Hasbro hires non-union actors to do commercials and any promo stuff that's not officially the video games or the movies or the shows. And I'm like, oh, okay. And even if they use clips that are actually from the cartoon, they still redub them. I'm like, interesting.
Lindsay was just talking today, just this afternoon. She was complaining about toy commercials and how they're always like, they want like buyouts and perp, and they want to pay like friggin' $700 and stuff. It's weird how they do.
Yeah, and because of that, it got me the job of also doing voices for toys. So I'd instantly marked off 2 off my nerd list: Star Wars, check; toy voices, check. So I'm actually the voice of Captain Rex and 3 different toys, I believe, and then Anakin Skywalker and 1 very specific toy that only released internationally. And again, another weird, funny story. But that's actually how, because of the Anakin toy, is how I got introduced to the toy department at Hasbro. Because the girl who worked on that used to work on Transformers Animated, and I was like, oh, Transformers. I was like, because I remember coming in on the Skype call, or not the Skype call, the ISDN connection, came on, and they were talking about Transformers. She's like, I just could not find a good Bumblebee sound alike. And I did a great Bumblebee.
And you're like,
wait. If only you had known me a month or 2 ago. And then she's like, oh, do you do it? And I'd been told by the studio, don't do any voices for them unless they specifically ask you to. If they ask you to, you can do them. And I'm like, okay, I understand rules. And she's like, I mentioned that I do Optimus Prime, and I'd been doing it for like 30 years or however many years at the time. And she's like, oh, can I hear it? And I'm like, well, she asked. And I did the entire monologue from the 2007 movie from memory in Optimus Prime's voice. And she was like, that was the best I ever heard. And I recorded Peter Cullen. I even geeked out in front of him. I didn't even mean to. She was like, Mr. Cullen, can we get a level? And he's like, my name is Optimus Prime. And she's like, yes, you are Optimus Prime. And so we kind of hit off a little bit of a friendship with that. And she passed on my information to Hasbro's Transformers department. And the guys at Comic-Con are like, oh, yeah, you worked on us with Star Wars. We're also working on some Transformers stuff.
Dude, there was just like 18 nerd keywords in that sentence.
Yeah. He was like, would you be interested in doing any Transformers voices? And I'm like, absolutely. But I also know the guy who does that for them, and he still is doing it for them. But that, again, kind of helped build the bridge over to the people where I needed to get in front of to be able to do voices for Transformers stuff. And it just happened to be Machinima, who produced the Transformers series that I worked on, were at the Hasbro booth interviewing folks, and they knew me from Honest Trailers and kind of connected the dots. And once Honest Trailers became a thing where people recognized it, then all of a sudden I went from being ignored at booths to being like, oh, you're the guy that works on that thing. Yeah, we definitely need to connect. That meeting led to being, I didn't even have to audition. They just cast me as Optimus Prime because the Combiner Wars, the first season, was ridiculously low budget. So there's no way they could get Peter Cullen in. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. As long as Peter Cullen, because I've always lived by the rule, don't take another voice actor's job. And it's like, as long as Peter Cullen has just straight up said no and refuses to do it, or legally can't do it, or passes whatever reason. If he's not doing it, I'm fine with it. But if he wants to do it, I would prefer him to do it because he's my favorite, and he should be the voice because he created the character. So the first season was me. Then they built up their budget, and then they recast me with Peter Cullen, which I thought was freaking great. So that was my first time actually voicing Optimus Prime, and because of that, the director got a call from Hasbro after they heard what I'd done and said, "Congratulations, Hasbro really wants to use you for a lot more stuff." And they started contacting me with several different kinds, like commercials and promos and all this and internal read stuff that Peter Cullen just would not do. And it ended up being a lot more than I thought it was going to be. And I was like, this is really cool. I mean, I'm not the official voice of Optimus Prime. I was for that one animated series, but this is freaking great. It's ongoing work, and I'm getting to do the voice of my favorite character, my favorite voice, and getting to do all this other stuff. And then I connected from that, doing the ADR sound alike stuff for Peter Cullen led to booking the ADR scratch stuff for the Bumblebee movie. And I had auditioned for Bumblebee a couple of times, same script, same characters, didn't hear anything back, just said, I gave it my best shot, whatever. And while I was there recording for Optimus Prime, they said, well, we have some other characters to scratch. And I knew it had to have been those things that I auditioned for. So I knew what it was. And I was up there with Steve Bloom. And if you know anything about voice actors at all, you know that Steve has worked on Transformers a lot. And she's like, we just need to know the characters you've booked before. And I'm like, great. Because I've booked one. And he's like, done it, didn't do it, done it. And by the time he got done, there was like 2 guys left. And neither one of them were favorites of mine. But I was like, yeah, okay. And while I was in there, I did my 3. And then I said, if you don't mind, would you mind if I tried out with some of the other characters? Because I've been doing these voices for 35 years. And if you want accurate original voices, I can do that for you. He's like, yeah, absolutely, give it a shot. And we had a conversation back and forth about Shockwave's voice being based on David Warner's Sark from Tron, and that was the impression that Corey Burton was doing when he came up with the voice, and talking about the vocoder effects for sound. Like, he could tell I was a freaking fan. And like, he's like, man, that's stuff I didn't even know before. And then after all that was said and done, I had no idea what was going to happen. I was happy to record the temporary voices, and fingers crossed that something good would happen from it. And after I left that last session, I found out afterwards I had been working directly with Travis Knight himself, and I had no idea that it was him this entire time. And I don't know what I did, if it was just the fact that I was confident enough to say, hey, can I try recording some of these other voices? Maybe it's because I showed some guts, or maybe he just thought I was really impressive, or whatever reason.
It's fairly ballsy.
Yeah, I thought so. I was like, you know what? Why not? The same advice my wife would give me. What's the worst that can happen? They'll just say no.
Well,
right?
and I mean, how many more, like you're saying, you've been doing these voices for so long, and like, this is the friggin' opportunity to pull them out of your ass, for God's sakes.
I knew this could be a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I was like, why not just ask and give it a shot? So I ended up booking Shockwave and Soundwave for the Bumblebee film with a guaranteed on-screen credit. My name's right up there, and my voice is right there with Peter Cullen, which is one of the biggest items on my bucket list that I never thought I would check off, working with Optimus Prime in Transformers with him as Optimus and me as another character. And I was like, holy crap, that is his voice, and my voice, like, all together, and us on freaking screen on the credits together. So that was just freaking blown away. And it kind of came full circle. I ended up going from just a fan and taking the thing at least the man and the franchise that kind of inspired me in that direction, and ended up working in that. So now I'm just, beating my head against the wall and trying to see if there's anything else I can book, video games or movies or cartoon shows or whatever I can do. I'm working on it. So, but now I'm officially voices in Transformers and things. It's freaking cool, man.
That is cool.